Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Pennsylvania Conference for Women. What a great event, what a great crowd. It's wonderful to see you all here. I'm Michelle Lowry. I'm the TD Bank Professor of Finance at Drexel University. In addition, I'm also Academic Director of our Public Governance Institute, the Gupta Governance Institute. But my primary role here today, of course, is to introduce this session, Outspoken, How to Make Your Voice Heard. And when they invited me to come and introduce a session, to MC a session, this was a session that I was really passionate about. I spend a lot of my time as a professor, in addition to teaching finance, to encouraging women in the field of finance. As you can imagine, finance is an area where we don't have a lot of women, and I feel very strongly that having more women in professions overall is just very, very important. And with that in mind, we have a great panel of women that have a lot to say on these issues. I'm going to start by introducing our moderator, who's Dr. Laura Sicola. So the first thing to note is if you're looking at your book, and it says that the moderator is Charmaine. Charmaine is not here. She unexpectedly couldn't come. She got sick, unfortunately. But the great news is that we have Laura here instead. Laura is author of this book, Speaking to Influence. In addition, she founded and runs a company called Vocal Impact Productions. She's an executive communications coach and trainer. She helps people looking to make an impact on all kinds of different dimensions. And I know that she's going to have a lot to say about all of these different issues. But as we were chatting ahead of time, she said, well, don't just read my bio, I do lots of other interesting things as well. So I'm supposed to highlight these things to you. And of course, I just want to ask her all these kind of questions too. But it was a long list, so I'll just mention a few. She's an avid chef, so she cooks well. She is a salsa dancer? Swing dancer, sorry. Okay, swing dancer, close. She is a card-carrying chocoholic. Keep the same one? Okay. So, with that, I am going to turn it over to Laura, who is going to moderate. We have about 45 minutes of the panel, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A at the end. So, looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Outspoken. It's funny to be up here leading this discussion today because for those of you who do know me, you may find it a little hard to believe, but according to my mother, I was an extremely shy child. If a stranger so much as looked at me, much less tried to talk to me, I would hide behind her pant leg and not come out until they went away. Then, of course, as my mother continues to tell the story, as she likes to say, somewhere around 4th grade, Laura found her mouth. And the world was never the same. So, what is it about finding your voice? And as I started to find mine, being the good Jersey Italian that I am, I managed to unintentionally fulfill an awful lot of negative stereotypes along the way. I was loud, I was brash, I was unfiltered, and I probably stuck my foot in my mouth an awful lot more than I would like to count, or have on my record, for that matter. But then I started to realize that what was important was not just being audible. Being heard is the means to the end. Being heard is about being understood, having people listen. It's about having more influence and getting better results. But of course, that's easier said than done for many of us, right? Because we can be our own worst enemy. Maybe you're on the end of the spectrum where you have ideas and you want to share them, but before you allow yourself to do that, your brain has to go into that downward death spiral of what-if questions, right? What if I make a mistake? What if I forget what I want to say? What if they think it's stupid? What if I ask a question and they think I should already know the answer? What if they ask me a question and I can't answer it? On and on. And then by the time we're done weighing all these pros and cons, the moment has passed, the meeting has ended, and we're sort of left at best with the recourse of maybe following up with an email to the group later on, or maybe sticking our head in somebody's office for a one-on-one afterward. But ultimately, nobody who was present at that meeting has an image of us as being valuable contributors to the discussion. It's one thing to be the brains behind the operation, but at some point, if you're going to lead, you need to be able to step up and be the face and the voice in front of it. Maybe you're on the other side of the spectrum. If you're someone who at any given moment has 12,000 ideas in your mind all at the same time, and they're all important, and you know that if you don't have a chance to get them out right now, you're going to forget something, and then they won't understand, so when it's your turn to talk, you open mouth and turn on a fire hose, and douse the audience with all of your ideas in this flood of information that just makes them a little bit confused at best, and most likely also gets you annoyed because somebody inevitably cuts you off. Someone interrupts, whether it's a man or a woman. This is what tends to happen. So as leaders, we need to be able to take all that information and distill it down into the most critical, most important, most relevant points in order for them to hear the meaning and the value of what we're saying, not just the words. And that ability to be heard is really crucial in trying to establish our leadership image. Because that's what leadership really is. It's an image, regardless of what your role or title is. And part of that image is about what is often referred to as that executive presence. There's lots of research on it, lots of discussions have been had around it, and lots of people are trying to define what it means. What are the factors in executive presence? And what I find is that no matter what study you're reading, you're seeing categories that include things like communication skills and gravitas. Well, that's great, but I actually have a problem with those classifications because I don't get how you can have gravitas be separate from communication skills. How do you convey one without the other? I mean, what is gravitas? If you were to break it down, excuse me, the gravitas includes things like, number one, do you have the technical expertise, knowledge? Sure, but in order, the key is the ability to convey that expertise to others in a way that they can get it no matter what their background is, no matter how much expertise they have, so that they not only recognize you as someone who they need to have on their team, but they can recognize you as the person who should be leading it. Gravitas also includes things like, can you speak truth to power and show grace under fire? What do those things mean? Okay, to be able to speak up, to manage up, to speak truth to power, you have to be able to sound confident, to stand your ground, to sound convicted in your beliefs, in your ideas. And then when so that's in your voice and your content, and then of course when you get that pushback, which inevitably comes, no matter what role you're in, you don't crumble under the pressure. You don't get defensive, we don't get too emotional, we don't sound shrill, we don't fall to pieces in the moment. That's also the ability, yes, to hear those differences of opinions, to receive them, but then ultimately to make your own decisions, stand your ground, own them, and take responsibility for them. Emotional intelligence is also a big part of executive presence, being seen as a leader, being heard as a leader. But emotional intelligence is about being able to read a room, read an audience, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, and help them understand what it is that you're trying to convey by being able to adjust the way that you say it, whether it's the content or the delivery, being able to read what they need and give your information to them in a way that they can process and digest it so that you get the response that you're looking for. But this actually causes us some internal struggle sometimes, because there's that concern with how can I be flexible in my speech style, my communication style, in order to be effective with such a wide, diverse audience, but still be authentic at the same time. And this is something that we, as women in particular, struggle with, the notion of authenticity. But I think the challenge, or the first step to overcoming that challenge, is the need to redefine authenticity itself. Because we make a mistake. Authenticity is not synonymous with comfort. Authenticity is not necessarily synonymous with comfort. Anytime you learn something new, there's a learning curve. And by definition, a learning curve means stepping out of your comfort zone. The process is authentic. the desire to get good at and be effective in those contexts is authentic. And with time and practice, that will become second nature and feel more natural and less authentic. But we have to embrace the entire process in order to be influential with wider audiences, allowing our voices to expand that way. We limit ourselves every time we find ourselves uttering internally or externally, well, that's not me. Because what that means is we've already put pre-established limitations on ourselves and on others. The idea that, well, that's your box, this is my box. My box will never expand, my sphere of influence will never expand because my communication repertoire isn't willing to expand in that direction. But the ability to style shift in the way that we speak and how we use our voices is known as code switching. And it can be as big as a shift in speaking in English in one conversation to then turning around and speaking in Spanish or Chinese in another. Or it could be on a smaller scale talking to IT in one conversation and then talking to marketing in another. There are still some shifts that need to occur. And the nice thing is, of course, that we all actually do this all the time. We're always code switching. I personally, right now, I'm up here, I'm in my speaker voice. I'm in my coach, teacher voice. And it's a little bit more serious, a little bit deeper, a little bit more focused. But I have a 3-year-old at home. I don't talk to him like this for one very important reason. He would stop playing with me. When I'm playing with him, my voice is higher and sing-songy. I'm goofy. I'm silly. I don't use words like executive presence and gravitas. He would run away. But it's not that this is the authentic me and that's the fake me or vice versa. It's not that in one of these contexts I'm being myself and in the other one I'm acting or faking it somehow. They're both 100% authentically me. I just understand that with different audiences, you'll need to see different sides of me to be able to hear what I need you to hear in the moment. And now, mind you, until 3 years ago, I didn't have that kid, and I didn't have that fully fledged mommy voice either. But it's something that I learned, and it's something that I embraced, and it's something where it eventually became an authentic part of my vocal repertoire. And that's what I want to encourage you all to do as well. Learn to expand that repertoire. Learn to embrace a little bit of that stepping out of the comfort zone in order to expand that identity and expand that sphere of influence that you have, your ability to use your voice effectively in greater and greater arenas. So how can we learn to do that? To use our voices so that people will see all the beautiful colors of our vocal spectrum in a way that's going to get us heard, get us influenced, and get us the results that we want. Well, I am thrilled to have here on stage with us today 3 amazing women, and a little bit of extra feedback on the microphone. But let me introduce these panelists and how they are going to help us get those results by finding and using our voices more effectively. First, down at the far end, we have Dina Blizzard, who is the CEO of One Funny Mother, Inc., and Ladies Out Loud. And I love the fact that in addition to creating the board game Chardonnay Go, which is apparently a much tastier version of Pokemon Go, for wine lovers and probably mommy groups everywhere, I'm guessing, Dina shared these 3 tidbits with me. Number 1, she likes to wear Birkenstocks, which means that she's both comfortable and just a little ashamed. And number 2, raise your hand if you can relate to this. She has 18 calendars and still has no idea where she's supposed to be at any of the time. And I swear I'm not making this up. She said she can think of no better meal than Sour Patch Kids, Cheetos, and bourbon. Which frankly makes me wonder exactly how many rounds of Chardonnay Go you have to play before you get to that point. Second, in the middle, Tracy Stover is Managing Director and Global Sales Executive at Bank of America. But I also learned that Tracy's passionate about a lot of things. Want to know what my favorites were? First, she's a big supporter of animal rescue. And 2 years ago, not a cat, not a dog, she rescued a 34-year-old horse who's doing great and is apparently a very happily kept man. Second, she's obsessed with skincare and is always on the hunt for the perfect sunscreen. And third, there's one investment that she firmly believes every woman needs to make: a good bra. And you have to get professionally measured to make sure you have the perfect fit and replace it every 6 to 9 months. And finally, closest to me is Veronica Rickert, who's the author of the book Outspoken: Why Women's Voices Get Silenced and How to Set Them Free, which I have just read, as a matter of fact, and I highly recommend. But I also learned a few things about Veronica that are not in the book. First, she has decided that if she is reincarnated, she wants to come back as a surfer on the California coast. Now, having lived in LA myself for a few years, I can honestly say I have never met a surfer who has the perfect diction like she does. I'll have to work a little harder to blend in there. Second, as a child, she saved money to legally change her name to Ginger. The good news is that she now realizes that there is actually a silver lining, a bright side to being bad at saving money. And talk about not being heard. She said for 2 years, Veronica lived in a town that was so easy to overlook that one year it was literally left off the state map. So with that, please welcome the panelists. Let's have a second here. Okay, so in the beginning, I just spoke about authenticity and about finding that challenge between being yourself and being able to use your voice in different ways to get through to different people. So to start with, in that area, Veronica, we all tend to have a lot of head trash around this, around using our voices, right down to the fact that frankly a lot of women just don't even like the sound of their own voice. So how can we as women lean into the act of speaking and using our voices?
First, I want to ask you that question because in the workshops that I teach, I ask everyone, how many of you love the sound of your voice? And tell me, how many of you love the sound of your voice? I mean, look at this. Are you looking around? There are 3 people in this room who raised their hands. And when I realized that, at first I thought it was kind of an unusual group of folks, and I was wrong. This is the answer I get wherever I go, and that makes me really sad. And I wondered, what's going on here? Why are we, as you said, head trash, why are we telling ourselves smack about our voices? And therefore, if you think you feel that and it doesn't affect how much you speak, you're wrong. It does affect it. And what I realized is that there's so much pressure, there's so much negative commentary about women's voices coming in. I mean, think of the adjectives we've heard. We've heard shrill, grating, annoying. I even heard the word klaxon, like a British ambulance siren, klaxon. I mean, these are the things we hear about our voices. Vocal fry, sexy baby voice, and these are all bad. Because, everything we hear about women's voices and the way they sound, it's so often it's bad. And so the first thing is turning the wheel in the other direction, realizing that it's possible to heal this relationship with our voice, to love it. And what happens when we love our voice? We can speak and we trust it, and we move out into the space and we live out loud instead of living so silently, which is, I think, a great tragedy for women. And I experienced that in my job as a radio host. It was so much harder to convince women to come on and talk about things, even when that thing was their area of expertise. They really wanted to step back, and I think we stepped forward and trying to begin that process. So really trying to make peace with your voice, and one more spoiler, that starts with making peace with your body. So this is tricky for women because the voice is the house.
a lot now.
That's a stretch. The house is the body houses the voice. That's where it lives. So if we're feeling like, okay, I'm not liking the way my body looks, it doesn't look like a 70-pound ballerina today, which is every day for me, I mean, then I'm not going to feel good about my voice. So we need to start feeling that it's okay, and to use our bellies to breathe, to use breath to fortify our voice. Because what are we taught from the time we're 6 years old about our stomachs? What do?
Suck it in.
Suck it in, right? We're supposed to suck it in and be small. You can't breathe that way. And what happens if you can't breathe? You can't talk. So you need to be able to release that. And as long as we're among friends here, right? Okay, how many of you are wearing Spanx or some kind of military-grade undergarment? Thank you. Of course you are. They're everywhere. Spanx boutiques are the new Starbucks. They're everywhere popping up. And I can beg you today, please, if you don't burn your Spanx, at least don't wear them on days that you have to speak. Give your body the gift of being able to breathe and get out there and start thinking about the voice as a friend and an ally.
It's great. I feel very justified in not buying an extra pair of specs the other day, so thank you very much. Tracy, finding your voice is particularly difficult for a lot of people who self-identify as introvert. If you're an introvert out there, raise your hand. Somebody self-identifies introverts. Wow. So it can be hard to figure out how to speak up, how to use your voice. So as an introvert, or if you are one, how do you leverage that? Because being an introvert has a lot of great qualities to it. How do you leverage it to make an impact, for example, at a meeting?
Well, first, if you get a haircut like this, just by in the new bra, exactly. And I am wearing a new bra today, by the way. I think many times I'm very extroverted. We talk too much, and it can start to wear on people that we may meet with on a regular basis. But I think with an introvert, if you can find maybe a partner in the room that maybe is a little bit more extroverted to help you get your voice, give you a section of that. Many times by you speaking up where you normally don't speak up as often, you can probably command the room a little bit better. People are going to say, wow, Tracy Sue, she has something to say. She's working on this. I think if you also plan what you're going to say, I think what we find too many times, we're rushing in our day, whether it's the 18 calendars or we're not sure where we're supposed to be. We think we have learned it all, but you haven't given yourself that quiet time to really plan out what do you want to say, when do you think is the right moment, here's the agenda, who's my audience. What I find is that most people are narcissists that you're going to meet with in your meetings, whether it's clients or internal. If you think about going to high school or going to college, most of the times what you were reiterating is, the practices or the themes that the professor put across. Are there ways that you can draw others into the conversation by using their name, by bringing familiarity, by looking them up in advance, looking up their company in advance, and say, hey, I know that these are your initiatives, here's how we tie in. I think you have to find a way. Is it note-taking? Is it practicing? And forcing yourself. An introvert's not a bad thing. You just may have to put yourself in a position that's not always comfortable, and you need to force yourself to do that. I think for me, being in banking and a salesperson, we do a lot of talking. We're with a lot of individuals. And even though we're talking, we have to make sure that the points that we're making are impactful to that audience in order for us to be successful, sell, and generate a new customer. So think of it that way more, generating new customers. The other thing is also the psychology of the room. I spend a lot of time as soon as I get in a room and try to watch the interactions with all the different people in the room to see, okay, who's going to be my troublemaker? Who's going to be the guy or gal that thinks they know the most? Who's the IT person that's going to throw out, can you do XML40F725 version? What's it going to be? And can you preempt maybe some of that as you're having that conversation? But it really is about forcing yourself to do it. I'll tell you a funny story. We were in, somewhere like Midland, Michigan, Dow Chemicals in Midland, Michigan. It's the sugar beet capital of the world, on the way to Mackinac Island. And I hear the person that I'm going on this pitch with, it's 4 a.m. and the thin walls, and I'm hearing this person talk over and over and over again. That's right. She was practicing on index cards her entire pitch for the next day. And she did brilliantly, but she knew at first time. So are there exercises that you can do, by yourself? Are there exercises that you can find an ally? The other thing I like to do is find someone who may be, more senior than me, somebody who's a direct colleague, somebody that I may work with for a long time. That could be my true sounding board. To say, hey, how does this sound? Or after the meeting, did that sound okay? Or can we do something together? So try to harness that.
Great, thank you. So Dina, you teach women to speak up using exercises and concepts in theater and stand-up comedy, improv.
Yes.
But I often hear from female clients in particular, and especially women of color, that there's that wrestling internally of the challenges of not wanting to feel like they're acting, or wanting to not feel like they're being fake. So how would you respond to a woman who says, well, how do I use acting techniques without acting?
Right,
faking part, right? Like the faking. I think there's something to be said for that fake it till you make it, right? I think it's very valuable. I think I faked being a comedian for probably 7 years before I was actually funny, so that there's a certain amount that you have to fake. But our program is called Ladies Out Loud, and how it started is I was hosting lots of conferences and noticing I was the only woman many times on the stage. And I have 2 high school age daughters, and I just remember thinking, if we don't teach younger women how to be better speakers at that age, at high school, nothing will change in 20 years. All of you are here to learn this now, but your children are going to have the same problems if we don't start teaching women to speak up earlier. And so we started the program 2 years ago with high school girls, and we were at this conference last year, and there was a high school program, and I expected 350 high schoolers to be there, and they were, but the whole room is also packed with women. Maybe some of you might have been there. And we started to realize, we're focused on high school students, but there's still, decades of us that, other than a college public speaking class, maybe Toastmasters, if you have the money, there's Dale Carnegie, but, when we decided to do that, I really thought to myself, okay, so how do we teach this, right? And I started to realize that all my friends who are artists, so spoken word, comedy, theater, improv, they're all great speakers. But all my friends who are like normal friends with like real jobs, they don't enjoy it for sure, and they don't love it. And so I thought, okay, so what's the difference? And the difference is that we do it all the time. As a comedian, I'm on stage all the time, spoken word, doing it all the time. And so we decided to set this whole program based on an open mic concept. And the concept is that you have to practice. That there's no one-day seminar that's going to teach you to be a better speaker. At the end of the day, I'm better because I just did it more times than you did. So that's it, that it's just having to do it over and over again. And so we were running the program one day, and it's a 6-week program, and then the 7th week they graduate and they do some performance. And there's a bunch of artists that run it and a couple moms. And we very much talk about, teaching people how to speak, but as an artist. And the biggest part of that is there are no rules. Artists go up every single night, every weekend, and they put themselves out there, and sometimes they fail, and sometimes they're successful. And, they do these in little coffee shops and clubs all over. And so one day they're on the main stage, and they look amazing. They're like, how did that happen? It happened because they did all these coffee shops and all these basement parties where they could just get some time and practice. And so we tell the girls, we talk about body language, we talk about voice, we talk about all of those things that we should traditionally talk about in public speaking, and then we don't talk about it anymore. Then we just talk about content. And some of the greatest things happen when you can preface what you're saying in a story, right? So you were just talking, when you got to the story, I was like, oh, what happened? And the story, I was like, what happened in the wardrobe? And so there were 2 girls that were graduating, and one went up, and they're given the choice. At the time, they used to give them choices, read something that's their favorite, a poem or a story. They could take a script from their favorite YouTube sketch, whatever, or they could do something original. And one girl went up, and she did a beautiful piece by Maya Angelou. It was beautiful. She read it perfectly. And then another girl went up, and she was all over the place. She was gangly. She was not making real good body language at all, but she had the story. She said, I hate going to amusement parks with my family, because every time we go, they all want to ride roller coasters, and I don't like them. So what do I become? I become the girl that holds all the stuff for the people that are going on the roller coasters. She's like, so I know this time I decided I'm going to bring my friend who also hates roller coasters, and that we will be together, at least hanging out. She goes, until I get there. And all of a sudden, the girl decided she liked roller coasters. So now I'm holding everybody's stuff and herself, and by myself, and she just is exasperated. And the story just goes on in these fine details, and she just kind of ends it in just complete frustration. And it was not perfect, and it was not at all refined. It was just a kid talking about the story that every single one of us could relate to. And so afterwards, we were all talking all about moms and artists. And one of the moms said, that was so good. That girl, Deanna, did Maya Angelou. That was really good. And I was like, yeah, it's all right. She said, but it's perfect. I was like, yeah, no, I wouldn't want to watch it again, but yeah. She was, what are you talking about? That's what she I said, listen, if it was a public speaking competition, she would win. If you're asking me who I want to hang out with after the competition, I want to hang out with the other kid, the one that just talks like a normal person. And yeah, she's not refined, and yeah, you know, she paces, and I had to keep following her, you know, she's all over the place. But it kept my attention, for sure. And, you know, learning how to speak under the auspices of following these tenets that are how artists learn. You don't have to be perfect. And sometimes the odder you are, the more you stand out and preface things as stories. People are engaged that way. So, you know, we teach public speaking from a very different perspective. But I think that the tenets of what we teach, going back to the question, is you're not acting. The best thing you can teach yourself to be a better speaker is to do it often and be yourself. And find those places if you are an introvert. Find those strategies for yourself. But at the core, it's practice and really just kind of finding your voice.
Terrific. So let's back up for a second and let's look at some of the basics. And you each just give a pointer or two on this. Gigi, why does using your voice matter in the first place? At Bank of America, for example, what influence does using your voice well have on who gets hired or promoted?
So I mean, I talk a lot about brand with the folks that I work with, because not only is your work your brand, the product that you produce, whether it's coding, whether it's, you know, launching a product or something along those lines, but your brand is your voice. What do you have to say? How are you contributing? Can you talk at a strategic level and then bring it down to the detail level? And if you think about an interview, the majority of interviews I do are all around the world, and they're mostly over the phone. Most of the people I don't even meet necessarily in person. And so if you're not going to have a voice, if you're not going to have a strategy and lead that call and distinguish yourself, you're probably not going to make the next round. We have a job opening right now for a junior sales role. We had 42 people on the first day apply for the job. So you have to say to yourself, how am I going to differentiate and get my opinion across? So it's key. I think it's also, we need to ask for what we want. I think typically as women, great story, one of my first jobs, this guy Michael Smith, I'd love to know where he is now, Core States Bank, if everybody remembers that back in the day around here. Good, somebody's older than older maybe. But I went in and I was like, Michael, I want a raise. And he's like, done, how much? I'm like, I didn't think of this. So I think it's that preparedness of how you bring that in. So, you ready for the next question?
So Veronica, in that same sort of corporate context, you talk about something that you call cubicle voice. What is it, and what do we do about it?
Oh gosh, cubicle voice is something I stumbled across in my coaching business. I would have these women come in, and a lot of times they had these really papery voices. It's like, hi Veronica, how's it going? Hi, what? I think you said how's it going, and I would really struggle to figure out what was going on. And they were young, they were healthy, they were successful. And it turned out they also had something in common. They worked in cubicles. And I discovered that this is this very common strand. So what are women good at? What are we supposed to be good at? We're supposed to be good at being considerate, looking out for other people, not going too far out of our way to make people uncomfortable, accommodating, team player. And when you're in the cubicle, my mic is cutting in on a little here. I think when you're in the cubicle, what happens is, it's just this very tamped down feeling that women get. You have to whisper it. They're going around, how's it going, Barbara? Is everything going on? You have everything you need, and then they scurry to the next. So what women get good at in cubicles is whispering and scurrying. And it's difficult for women to shake this off when they go home. It's what I'm finding that for men, it seems to be a little easier. Okay, I was in the cubicle, I'm shaking it off, and I'm going home, and I'm reverting to my full voice. But for women, they tend to pull it with them. So they take that cubicle voice with them where they go, and it becomes a habit. It just becomes how they speak. And so what I try to do is work with these women to access that full voice again. And I'll be honest, some women have had to leave their place of work because it just didn't work for them. And whenever I talk like this, women come up to me after and go, oh my God, this is me, I work in this and I feel like this. And so there are different solutions if this is something you're dealing with. you might want to talk with your team leader and say, hey, can we get noise canceling headphones for the folks who are worried about being disturbed? Or can we create another space where there are breakout rooms? If we want to talk at full speed, can we go in there? Or can we just support a space where we can speak with our full voices? Can we just as a culture say, this is okay, and I want the women in this organization to be able to speak with their full voices? Can we do that? So it might be at the HR level, it might be at the personal level, or it might be at the level where you just need to go somewhere else where you can inhabit your voice. So this one particular woman that I worked with, she was my very first cubicle voice client. And we discovered this, and she didn't believe me, but I saw her. We met up as I was writing my book, and I wanted to check in. I said, what's going on? And she said, I did have to leave, but her voice was completely different. She was a whole different person. Because the voice not only gets tamped down, but then you start kind of doing this posture. Is anyone familiar with this? Hi, Barbara. It's that voice. How's it going? And we want this. We want the shoulders back. We want the voice strong. We want the confidence to be able to have a cognitive flow. And so it's something to be sensitive about, but I think this is a new issue that HR departments are starting to look at, and corporate culture people need to start looking at.
And the new bra would probably help.
Oh,
Yeah, I was always the person that said you need to go in an office.
Use the closet.
Yeah.
So the brass tacks, what do you think is at the core of becoming a good speaker? Lay it out.
So I think the two things that they said already, being bold, I think is important. I think the use of your voice is really important. I think the piece that I would add, again, coming from an artist perspective, is I have found great success in being vulnerable. It's been really important. So I'm a comedian. I started in Philly years ago. I'd say the people know us from is when Pokemon Go came out, we made a video called Chardonnay Go, and we told parents they could find a glass of wine in their neighborhood if they used a special app. Just because I just was so done with my kids asking me to look for it. I was like, I'm not running unless there's wine. So we made that video. And then I guess 2 years ago, when back to school was happening, and everybody was complaining about school supplies, I went to Target and I talked about school supplies and drank vodka at Target. And like 100 million people watched it. And I also had another video of my daughter, which is a little different. She looks a little different. And we had a particularly bad IEP meeting, which, they're all bad. They're all bad IEP meetings. And I just, like every meeting, I leave and I go cry in my car. And I literally couldn't even make it home. I made it to a CVS and I got hysterical in my car. And it's those moments where you're having an awful moment and you think, I'm the only one. I'm the only one that's crying in a CVS parking lot after an IEP meeting. But as a comedian, right, I trained myself to think like an artist. All of us actually have such common experiences. It's just that most of us in the room are moms or women, and we try to protect other people. We don't want to unload on people, so we don't talk about it, and we just suffer in silence with Sour Patch Kids and bourbon in a shower, right? It's just that our whole business has been about talking about it. And so, what I found is that when you put yourself out there, whether it is finding that partner, to be your extroverted partner to help you in that room, or any other strategies you can think of, it's really about owning who you are. And being able to talk to people in the room, before the meeting, be like, listen, I have some things I'm going to say, but, can I run them by you first? Or, what do you think about this? There's lots of strategies, but I think the biggest thing in teaching public speaking as an artist is to really value that part where you're vulnerable, because I bet there's so many other people in the room that feel the exact same way. They're afraid of the same things that you're afraid of, or really see a need to have a change to be made, and there's power in numbers, and we have found, like I said, in our worst moments, in my worst moments, putting them into the universe, you start to realize, comedy in many ways is therapy, not just for the people that are listening, but for the people that are performing it, to be able to just kind of get it out. There's something cathartic about that. So just, another thing is, all of these things, being bold, use your voice, and being vulnerable.
So let's tie it all together in a little bit of a case study. I'm going to give you a scenario or two, and I'd like you each to just weigh in on this. And as I go through, if this sounds familiar to any of you, just either raise your hand or by applause.
People shout it out.
People shout, yes. So scenario number one, getting interrupted or getting cut off. Mostly by men, but frankly, research shows that women cut each other off far more than either gender cuts off men. So the idea of getting cut off. Anybody can relate to that frustration? Yes? All right. And scenario number two. When a woman makes a comment at a meeting, perhaps, it's kind of glossed over, and then about 5 minutes later, the guy sitting next to her says the exact same thing. And everybody thinks it's a genius, yes? All right, so yes, either or both. A, why do you think this happens? What contributes to it? And what recourse do we have? What do we do about it? Go.
I hear this all the time. This is so common, just like this response in this room. And I think it's something, why is so tricky? I think it's because we come from, just at the super base level, we live in a culture that doesn't like women to talk. We want women to be quiet, and we want them to be small. And there's a lot of data on this, by the way, from the interrupting. Women executives who speak more than male executives are perceived as 14% less confident. Well, his competency rating goes up by 10% when he speaks more often. In Hollywood, women speak a third of the time. One study of the 900 top grossing films found that women speak only a third of the time that men. And by the way, they're more likely to be nude as well. So they're naked and mute.
Nobody's listening anyway.
Nobody's listening. Nobody's listening. And Frozen, God, I love the movie Frozen. This broke my heart. This is a princess power movie about how two princesses' sisterly love for each other is more important than loving the dude. But guess what? Men speak more often in Frozen. So these are things that disappoint me. But all of this to say is you're not crazy when you feel like women's voices aren't listened to, like these scenarios, or they're marginalized or they're sidelined. There's data now, it's true. This is something real. These are the challenges that women's voices face. And so when things like that happen, that's what we need to push back against. So when you hear the heap-heating thing, he repeats the thing that she said, that's what we need.
Heating. I never heard that before.
Have you heard depropriating? That's another one. Right, so there are things engaging an ally, so I can say, oh, that's interesting, Bob. I think you're picking up on what Laura said a minute ago. Thanks for bringing that back.
Yes, ladies, we need to stand up for each other. What do we do? We hear that happen? We just look at each other. No, but we're not doing anything about it. So absolutely, find an ally to advocate for you.
And the moderator, we can train our moderators and leaders of meetings, like Laura, to be aware if that were to happen and to call it out. Sometimes you're the only woman in the room, and it can be difficult to advocate. But difficult to say, oh, Bob, thank you for picking up on what I said, but you can do it. It's a little more chutzpah. But if you have allies in your corner, and they can be men, they don't have to be women. All you need is an ally and an awareness of this culture so that we can start being aware, seeing the invisible wallpaper that, yeah, sometimes we do. We just push women's voices aside and we don't hear them. And we got to start hearing them. We got to train ourselves and we have to support each other.
But understand you're in a meeting for a reason, right? You were invited because you've been asked by somebody because you're going to drive value in that meeting. My typical response would be something like, oh, thanks, Bob. It must be Groundhog Day again. You're repeating all of my ideas. Now, hopefully you know Bob well and maybe you can have that banter back and forth. Or you need to be prepared for the next thing if Bob comes back and says, oh, last week you did that to me as well. So I do think that you need to find an ally that can help you. I think what also can be interesting is I think we all assume that everybody's coming to the table with conscious bias. Typically, it's unconscious bias. As I say to my husband, you are left-handed. They gave you the green scissors. We're not going to say any more about that. But you don't. It depends. Were you raised in the South, where as a woman you should be a little bit more demure, or in a household where that's how it was, or were you in a household where you were encouraged to speak up? I think everybody's coming from a different place. I think the other thing you can do is maybe in advance of the meeting or after a meeting, maybe just make somebody aware. Don't assume that everybody knows that they're doing that. Everybody in the meeting with you is likely nervous, whether they're male, female, etc. Want to make an impression. It's a competitive world out there. We're all looking to be the top dog and all of that. So maybe if you can bring the attention to it, or hey, can we power off one another. The other thing I think women do is they don't say it with force. I accomplished, I did this, my suggestion is, not like, well, I think, or we could do. Have that power language. Well, Bob, that's a great idea. However, this is the way that I see it from a different view, or here's the voice of the customer, or here's the voice of our internal partners. You have to have some authority and passion about what you're talking about, because you have to convince people, right? You're not going to buy a car from the guy or the gal who's like, oh, works pretty well, it's got power windows, and, you want somebody to be like, wow, this thing is awesome, right? It's got, GPS or whatever. Find your passion and dive into what you want to get across. So part of that is maybe the cubicle life doesn't work for you. Where do you want to be and where can you jump off?
Yeah, I don't think I have any answers for you. I'm not in boardrooms. I'm an entrepreneur, so but as a comedian, I'm around men all the time, and there's a lot. I don't have a lot of people joke stealing, like that's a big thing for men. There's not a lot of women, doing stand up, sadly. But I guess I would be fine because I'd be like, shut up! I just said that. And that would be what I would do. And I would do stand up.
Yeah, it's like 360s. We have to do 360 reviews on everybody. Like, what Tracy's, great talents. She's incredibly direct. Then it's what could she work on? She's too direct. Yeah, right. That's my problem. The body language.
Yeah, no, that my face is my problem.
Me too.
Yeah. I won't say anything, but my face is the problem. You need to tone your face down, but I can't control it. If you say something dumb, it's going to react. It's so bad. So that's why I can't work for someone else. That's why I go.
But that's where practice comes in, because the best class I ever took at a bank was actually taught by a troupe of actors and actresses. And it was more around, through your product knowledge or whatever knowledge you're bringing to the table, how do you make eye contact with people in the audience, how do you connect, projecting your voice, and watching how you come across, because you can either invite people in or shut them down. Like, the best thing was you go to a Sting concert and after you leave, you're like, oh my God, he stared at me the whole time.
And there's something you said earlier about reading the room. That's as a comedian, that's what we're really good at, right? And when I was very early on, I was just starting, and there was a guy sitting in the audience by himself, which never happens, usually couples or groups, right? It's this guy sitting in the audience, and I was very green, that means new, and I really didn't know what I was doing, and I said, hey, so, what's your story? He's like, I'm just, it's like a Holiday Inn, this club, because I'm just enjoying the show, and I said, oh, is it like business or, pleasure? I'm in a little, some both. Right now, the clues are starting to unravel, but I don't see them because I'm so dumb, right? And I said, well, that's weird. If it's here for pleasure, like, is your wife here? He's like, no. I was like, well, this is a dumb trip. Now, I'm sure, again, everyone is unraveling this, but I'm just so, and I go, well, it can't be going well. You guys must be fighting or something. And I'm going on, and I'm just digging my own hole. And then, yeah, you all see it, right? And then he just gets really quiet. He just kind of puts his head down because he doesn't want to hurt me if I'm hurting myself. And then he says, my wife died 5 years ago, and this is where we came for our anniversary. And I come here every day. And now I'm a huge asshole. Right. And I literally had nothing to say. And that's the other important part about just being present in the room. Like in that moment, I have sucked the air out of the room. And everybody meets me now. We're waiting for me to say something. And I just was like, thanks for ruining the show. Thanks for ruining it. I have no way to get myself out of it. And it was just important, like reading this room and, what can you say, what can't you say. And, there's something about putting yourself out there, but read the room. Maybe they don't want to see you today.
And just as a period at the end of that sentence, something that you've all alluded to is I think we often give ourselves a false choice. Either I have to be nice, or I have to be the bitch in the boardroom. I can be direct, or I can be subtle. And tact, I think it was Isaac Newton who said, tact is the art of being able to make a point without making an enemy. And there is a lot of finessing in the middle. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Do not give yourselves the false choice of saying, well, this one doesn't work, so my only recourse is that. Find the constellation of factors that will help you get through to that person so that your voice is heard without trampling people in the process. And I think that's really easy.
I am very sorry, but we are completely out of time, and we actually have 2 people on our book signings. So let me just quickly thank all the members of our panel. And for those of you that are interested, Veronica spoke Outspoken, and Laura spoke Speaking the Influence. They'll be in the exhibit hall doing book signings now. Thank you so much, and one more round of applause.